is the last part of chapter 7, in the last lecture of this course, is about Q-Bessel function in physics. So Bessel function, what are the Bessel function is a the classical Bessel function is defined by this, and we will have m integer, so gamma of m is m minus 1 factorial. And this Bessel function usually are the canonical solution of this differential equation. And maybe sometimes people use a modified Bessel function where there is no minus 1 power m, but only plus. And in this lecture, we will use the Q-analog of Bessel function. Q-analog means you replace n factorial by 1, 1 plus q, and etc., this product. If you put q equal 1, it gives back n factorial. Or sometimes you can write this product like this. And there is different Q-analog of Bessel function. But in this lecture, in this chapter, we'll use this Q-analog. It's where q in the x set, even with a y parameter. There is an extra parameter y, where a in xn means 1 of minus a, 1 minus aq, etc., 1 minus aq power n minus 1. So if you put a equal y equal 1, you get the classical product analog of n factorial. And in the numerator, usually we don't put this for the analog of Bessel function. Usually people put nothing or put q power n to the square. And here it's a special q analog where instead of n to the square, you put n this coefficient for the q. So from the previous lecture, we have just to remind you the previous lecture about Lorentzian triangulation in 2D quantum gravity. So we are counting this such a picture with a 4 parameter, L1, L2, G, and L. And it's a special case where all this border left condition, the left border was the condition all the triangle were up, and in that case, it was a Catalan number. And we put this in bijection with pyramid of diamonds, and we count these pyramids to 4 parameters, number of diamonds, the width, and number of touch on the left column and on the rightmost column. And this gives you a generating function. We have seen this generating function with beautiful modified Fibonacci polynomial. And this generating function was the product of 2 generating functions. This is general ellipse, and this is a double half pyramid, which are in bijection with this triangulation with the left and right border condition like this. So I go quickly just to remind you all this. And we have seen the Nordic decomposition of a heap, which of a connected, which gives you this functional equation for connected heap. And with this equation, which also give a bijective proof, you can cancel completely the Fibonacci polynomial, and what remains is only q, the generating function for a Catalan number. Also, we have seen defining the curvature of the space-time, two-dimensional space-time, as a number of triangles above 3 here and above 3 here. And what I did not say last time, it's in the paper by the physicists, they do what they call the continuum limit of all this generating function, and in continuum limit give you the modified Bessel function I1. So Bessel function appear also in the 2D quantum gravity. And from a commutative point of view, if you want to have a continuum limit, it's better to put q, a q analog, everything go commutatively, and then q tend vers 1, and this give you back the continuum limit. So open problem is to do the q analog of this with a curvature, and maybe to explain the appearance of Bessel function in this 2D quantum gravity. But I will explain the appearance of Q-Bessel function in 2 physics problems, the staircase polygon problem and the solid on solid problem in statistical mechanics. So first, parallelogram polyomino, staircase polygon, appear Q-Bessel function. So here is a staircase polygon. So it's I have done this many times last time on the Catalan garden. So I remind you the definition. It's a very special case of polyomino. We have seen animal, polyomino, directed animal. This is a directed animal if you replace each cell by a point. But it can be defined by you have 2 points on the square lattice. And it's a portion of the square lattice which is between these 2 green paths. Each of these green paths go north or east, elementary step north or elementary step east. And they don't intersect. except at the starting point and ending point. So this is called also sometimes it's called staircase polygon when you just look the green border, staircase polygon. If you look inside, it's a parallelogram polyomino. And we want to count this according to three parameters: the number of columns, the number of rows, so M and N, and the area, number of square inside the polyomino. So we know, it's well known that if you count this according to the perimeter, staircase polygon having a perimeter 2n, n is the length, common length of these two green paths above and below. So the number of polyomino like this with perimeter 2n is exactly the Catalan number Cn plus 1. So we are in the Catalan garden. And the more difficult part is to count this according to the area. This is a kind of Q analog of Catalan numbers. You have a double distribution by perimeter and by area. And this is called the Polia Q Catalan. So it's different Q Catalan. But more, instead of counting this according to perimeter, we can distinguish column and row. So it's three parameters: number of column, number of row, and area of the. So I have a generating function with three variables: sigma, all such staircase polygon with m column, n row, and area equal to p. So this big summation over all staircase polygon, it's an infinite series in x, y, and q. So if you put x equal y, then you get back the derivative function with two parameters: perimeter, which give Catalan for q equal 1, and q, the area. So many papers in the beginning of the 80s or 90s, there is many papers which give the explicit generating function for such staircase polygon. It's a ratio G1 divided by J0, where J0 is the Q analog of the Bessel function, a certain with the parameter y inside, and J1 is another Q analog. You see, it's just a shift. Here you have if you put y equal 1 and q times 1, you have n factorial and factorial, and here you have n minus 1 factorial and factorial. So this is J1. J alpha is when there is a shift between the two and factorial is equal to alpha. So I claim I am going to prove. So there is many papers by Klarner, Rives, Bender, Deleuze, Gutmann, etc. And with Mireille Bousquet-Milou, we get a bijective proof of this as a simple application of the fundamental lemma on heaps of pieces.
So the only difference is that Q, right? Only one difference between J0 and
Yes, it's only n, and here n minus 1 and n.
and sign.
Yes, and there is plus, there is minus, and the sign also is n and n minus 1. So I am going to prove this. This is in the appendix of Kratenthaler in the lecture note of Cartier-Fouata in Séminaire Lotharingien. You know, it's republished in the Séminaire Lotharingien. And the appendix, Kratenthaler gave a nice introduction to heaps of pieces, and he gave this as an application of heaps of pieces. So I am going to give, this will be, you guess that this will be the numerator divided by denominator, trivial heaps and trivial heaps above and below. This is a special case of the inversion lemma. But first I have to transform a parallelogram polyomino into a heaps of pieces. So here is the bijection. So I am going to give a bijection between such parallelogram polyomino and semi-pyramid of segment. So what is here is a semi-pyramid of segment. So the basic piece are segment, ij. Dependency relation is if two segments have a non-empty intersection. And semi-pyramid means there is only one maximal piece, and this maximal piece is a segment 0 or something. This maximal piece here is touching the vertical axis. It's the same as semi-pyramid of dimers, but instead of dimers is only segment of length 2, and here you have segment of any length. And then I put a weight on my hips by putting a weight on the basic piece. So be careful, I start with 1 here. It's not starting at 0, it's 1, 2, etc. It's a positive integer, the hips of segment. And then a weight of a segment, if I have a segment ij, is q power j, so it's q power the indices of the rightmost extreme point of the segment, t, so t is going to count in my hips the number of segments, and u power j minus 1. So for this segment, you have u power 4. so the variable u in green is counting the length of the segment. Q is counting, you see, it's a Q analog, because it can be as big as it's just Q power the indices of this point, and T for counting number of segments. So as usual, the weight of the hips is going to be the product of all this weight, and I claim that I have a bijection. There is a bijection between pyramids of segment. No, it should be semi-pyramid. Semi-pyramid of segment on the positive integer. Oh yes, pyramid with a projection of the unique maximal piece is 1K. I have a bijection between this semi-pyramid of segment, and parallelogram polyomino, such that the bijection is going to be weight preserving, and the weight of the hips, total product of the weight of all the segments with this weight of segment, is going to be exactly Q power the area of the polyomino, T power the number of columns, and U power the number of rows. So each segment will correspond to a column. U, the total length, if you sum all this length of all these segments, you will get the number of rows of the polyomino, and Q, the area, will become this, the sum of the indices of the right part of each segment. So here is the bijection. So take this staircase polygon. I put different color for each column, because each column is going to become a segment. So if you separate each column, I put in red the number of cells of each column. 3, 2, 4, 3, 2. Easy. Now I put in blue, between two columns, how many cells they have in common. Here there is 2 cells between the first 2 columns, so I put a 2. Here there is, between the second and third column, there is 2 cells. 2. Between the third and fourth, there is 3 common cells. And at the end, there is 1 common cell. And then I take for each column, I have a pair, I have a segment 2, 3, 2, 2, 3, 4, 1, 3, and 2. For each column, I have a pair of numbers. The blue number is less than the red number, of course. It's okay, so now this pair of numbers is becoming segment. Okay, so I have my segment 2, 3, 2, 2, 3, 4, 1, 3, and the 2, which was isolated. By convention, I put a 1 at the beginning of the last. And then, so I have, it's a total order. I have the first column, the first segment, second segment, third segment. So I make a heap of this. So the first segment, 2, 3, the second segment, 2, 2. The third one, 3, 4. Now the next one, 1, 3, and 1, 2, and I get a heap of pieces. A heap of segment, a semi-pyramid of a segment, and I claim that this is a bijection. As usual. The word is well done, it's nice, and so maybe I don't give the proof of the. I will give the way we found this bijection. There is some trick to. You can think maybe it's miraculous, but using the Catalan garden I exposed last time, it's like a brick. There is elementary bijection. I have classified such that such bijection is going to be a combination of a well-known bijection. So it's a tool, you see. You can. It's becoming to put some order in the bijection. There is some fundamental bijection, means they are used many times, and there is maybe if you use them, it's like an elementary brick to make some more bijection. But straight away, before proving the bijection, let's give the gyrating function. So now I claim that I have semi-pyramid of segments. So okay, I am exactly in the condition to apply the extension of inversion lemma. And over there, because it's a constraint of the maximal piece, I have to count the set capital M is all the segment 0 and J. All the maximal pieces is all segment touching the vertical axis. So I have the gyrating function of such semi-pyramid of segments is numerator, the sum of trivial hips avoiding the set capital M. So it's segment avoiding the point 0. So it don't. 0 is not in the segment, and D, all trivial hips of segment. Alternating summation. I claim that D, the denominator, is exactly given by this Q Bessel function. Q analog of Bessel function with a U parameter inside. I claim that you see the D The alternative sum of trivial heaps of segment is exactly given by this. I give the proof like this. So from integer partition to cube SL. So let's decompose this to see where is the double. This is 1 over this is the partition. Again another partition. So I take the first. I take this term in the fraction. I am going to decompose. So this term is a generating function for partition with at most. If I put 1 over this, it's partition with at most n part. Multiply by q power n means it's partition having exactly n part. And t is counting number of parts. So in fact, this generating function is a generating function for this picture, where partition, each blue ball is a part of the partition, and the weight of the blue ball is q power, the index of the ball. For example, I have this partition is 3, 4, 5, 5, 8, 8, 8, and 10. Okay, each blue point is weighted q power I, if the point is I, and total weight of this, it's analog to Faraday-Rao partition. Total weight of this will be exactly this. And T is counting number of blue ball, and q power n over this is the weight of the partition. So now I am going to multiply by q power n choose 2. Mean you multiply by q 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5, which means you transform your partition, your heaps of blue point into a strict heaps of blue point. I mean the first one, you shift the first one by 1, shift the second one everybody by 2, by 3, by 4, so this is very classical bijection between strict partition and weak partition. So now multiply, so I have this generative function. Now I have to multiply again by 1 over this, and I claim that multiplying by this is again defined by a certain partition, and I claim it's doing this, to replace each of the blue ball by this segment. You are dilating a dilatation of the ball blue into segment. The dilatation is a length in green, which is taking account in this parameter which is here. And you see the distance between two consecutive blue balls is exactly the distance between two consecutive segments. There is a transformation. Again, you have to shift all the segments. The shifting increases the weight by 1 over 1 minus qq2 qn. The u take account of the length. Sorry if I go fast, but you can convince yourself that multiplying by this is equivalent to have a dilatation of each blue ball into a green segment, such that the distance between each blue ball is the same as the distance between two consecutive segments. So if you are convinced of this short proof, then so I get that the denominator is this Q analog with the parameter y of the cube SL function, and the numerator is the same, but you have to avoid the point 0. So it's just a shift. You multiply by q power n. It's just a slight shift of the. And that's the proof, or maybe an idea of the proof, where you have to apply the inversion lemma, and then the Bessel function is just for partition. You have a double partition, and one of the partition is given by the blue ball. Then the q power on the numerator is going to strict partition, and the second partition with the green parameter, it's extending from the ball to the segment, and this gives you trivial heaps of segment. Alternative genetic function of trivial heaps of segment is exactly this cube SL function. So some complement, you can random staircase polygon. Once you have when you have bijection for proving the algebraic function or the cube SL function, then you can get efficient algorithm. For example, this is a random parallelogram polynomial with a fixed parameter, with a fixed perimeter. Right? So it's an algebraic, it's Catalan number, so it's an algebraic equation. It can be encoded by DigPath. It's an algebraic language, so there is very efficient algorithm to pick up by random a word of an algebraic language. We are in theoretical computer science with taking by random a word generated by what is called grammar, algebraic grammar. Go back to the class last year. There was a few pages on algebraic rational language accepted by Automata, algebraic language. So you can easily find an algorithm to have a very efficient random parallelogram with a given perimeter. And you see some color of the cell. It's this time you apply one of the grammar, algebraic grammar giving the dict path. This comes from the cell. But now you can also, second problem, what is a random parallelogram polynomial with a given area? And here is a totally different. See, it's very thin. It's surprising. This is a random staircase polygon with a given area, and this has been done by Isabelle Dutzeau and Fedou in Bordeaux. So they apply some Q analog of algebraic grammar. So it's a little more complicated to get, but you see this picture. And this reminds you, this very, very thin, reminds you the picture of a random animal. And the random animal, in fact, it was with a fixed number of points. It was counting, as a polynomial, we are counting this by the area of the animal. So I say that this bijection from staircase polygon to heaps of segments, in fact, you can produce it automatically by looking the beautiful Catalan garden. There is many objects, you see, and there is many bijection with commutative diagram inside. We see the staircase polygon with the heaps of segments here. Staircase polygon, go back to this, to trees, to triangulation, here dict path, here again trees, forest of trees, and you can, and I'm not going to say you can go from this to this and go back to the heap, but I'm not going to do this because I am going to use a bijection of the class. So a festival of bijection. I have other description of the bijection. So let's take the stair decomposition of heaps of dimers. So first, there is a bijection between staircase polygon and dict path. So this was in last year in chapter 2a, page 110 to 116 in the Catalan garden, from dict path to staircase polygon. So here is a dict path. I gave last year two bijections with two Motzkin colors Motzkin paths, but here this is the second bijection. So let's take the dict path. There is some peak, and in red you put the height of each peak in the dict path, which give you a sequence of columns. 3, 2, 4, 3, 2. Now we have to glue the column together, the blue number of the before. So take the trough, the valley in the dict path, and the minimum valley height, I take 1 plus the height. So the minimum is 1 here, 1, 2, 2, and 3. So I put this blue number between the column, and you glue them according to the blue number. And there is only one way to glue them if you want to have a staircase polygon. Of course, it was only vertically convex polygon, then you have two different ways to glue each column together. But here, only one way when the column go always shifted to the northeast. So you glue them together and you get back your staircase polygon. So that's the first fundamental bijection of the Catalan garden. Staircase polygon to dict path. Now just apply the bijection of the class. Dict path to semi-pyramids of dimers. Dict path, the path was a heaps of cycle with a self-avoiding walk on the top, but because the dict paths go back, it's a circuit, it's go back U equal V, it's go back to the origin, so the self-avoiding walk is just a point. So it's a semi-pyramid of dimers. I replace dimer by cycle of length 2.
Battery 100%. Connected to MacBook Air to Xavier.
So you have already seen this video in
MacBook Air
previous
to
class.
Xavier. Disconnected. Ready to pair.
No. It's again same problem. Attends. Always this problem with
Battery 100%. Connected to MacBook Air to Xavier.
Okay, it's connected. We can go. So here the dict path, I have rotated the dict path 90 degrees, and then the cycle of length 2 is going to fall down.
The threaded circle, the wheel,
So what happened?
doing computation.
Each time there is some problem, so I do do something wrong, I think. It's okay, I start again. Where is my...
Maybe go back one slide and
Yeah, but it's stuck again.
oh, it's stuck.
I am stuck.
Oh,
Hmm? It's...
Anti-gravity has been discovered.
I don't know what happened. I am stuck. I try to get off of the... Okay, now...
Close the thing.
Uh-huh.
Can you close the file and open again?
Yes, that's what I have done. Attends. Okay, now I have closed the file. I put it again. I have to find the... Okay, so I hope now it's work. Donc ces objets sont en bijection heaps of diamonds and dig pass. You see, the violinist was Gérard Duchamp. We do some performance like this with other bijection with violin, and I have a heaps of diamonds, and then so I can how to go from this dig pass. So from the staircase polygon, I have a dig pass. Now from the dig pass, like this, I am going to have a heaps of diamonds. So I am starting, see the dig pass start, I rotate and I am starting like this. So you go and then the diamonds fall down, diamonds fall down. Each time you go back, you make a loops, you see, a cycle of length 2. So here is a heaps of diamonds, which, yes, it should fall down. And now third step, I am going to use the stair decomposition in the class, again, chapter 6a, page 50. So yeah, there's a stair decomposition of the heaps of diamonds, and which if I replace each of the stair by the blue point, I get a semi-pyramid of segment. You see, this was a bijection, this was under the bijection in the class. Each stair becomes a segment, and this was a bijection. So what you get is this stair of segment, which is exactly the same as before. So this is one way to get this bijection I gave directly before between staircase, polygon, and heaps of segment by combining the three bijections. Staircase to dig pass is very common. Dig pass to heaps, it's one of the fundamental bijections of the class. And now heaps of diamonds can be viewed as heaps of segment using the staircase decomposition. So you see, this was the direct bijection between parallelogram, polyomino, and semi-pyramid of segment. So it can be viewed like this as a combination of these three bijections. That's the way I found the bijection. In fact, there is a second way with using Lukasiewicz path. So it's a revision of what we have seen in this class and the class of last year. Lukasiewicz path. You remember last year it was a path. Instead of going down or up, then you can go up as many steps you want. So this was a typical chapter 2a of the class last year. Typical Lukasiewicz path. I use this to prove Lagrange inversion formula. And in the Catalan garden last year, I gave a bijection with dig path and Lukasiewicz path. You remember this is a dig path. And then each time there is a down step, you glue all this. You have some blue decomposition. Each each red step going down, you take all the northeast step just before. So you have a long sequence of northeast, and then maybe there is no northeast step before this red step. So this Lukashevich path become I don't have the, yes, here is the bijection. But what I need here is to do a reverse way instead of reading like this. The reverse way, it's you can go down as much as you want, and then you read the Lukashevich path in the other way. And this is the reverse unique decomposition. So I am going to do this for my dig path coming from the staircase polygon, staircase to dig path to reverse Lukashevich path. So here is my dig path. I do the reverse process. So it's you take each green step and follow by the longest sequence of red step going to the left. So you get this decomposition, and you replace each of these blocks by this step going left. So you get a Lukashevich path. See, this path written like this. You can go right only one step, or you can go left as much as you want, or if there is some level here, you stay at the same level. So this is the Lukashevich path, a rotated reverse Lukashevich path. And then again, you apply the classical bijection of the class. Any path can be viewed as a heaps of a cycle, but here for the Lukashevich path, cycle are going to become segment. And so I have a heaps of segment for my Lukashevich path, which becomes this, and which is the same as this. So I get back again the same heaps of segment as before. And this is the second way to go from this parallelogram to this. And this was the solution. I give the solution of the exercise, chapter 6a, page 59. You have to compare these two bijections between the Dick, Lukashevich, and playing with the bijection key of the path, of the class. Now another description. Again, there is another bijection in the class, the bijection psi, between paths and heaps of what I call oriented loops. And instead of self-avoiding walk on the top, there is a trail, which means a self-avoiding. There is an oriented path, and you never go twice on the same oriented edges. If you don't remember, this is to refresh your memory. This was a path, a succession of edges. You see, an oriented loop means that you can go several times on the same edges, but not several times on the same oriented edges. And a trail means it's a sequence of edges. All the oriented edges are different. So this was, I need this to prove the ER zeta function on graph. So let's do this for dig path. This was also an exercise in the class, heaps of oriented loops. So here is a dig path, rotated dig path. And then I follow the bijection psi now. So you have this, and then this, you see. So nothing fall down, like in the violin bijection, because I have a sequence of all the edges are different. But now when I do this, this edges is the same as this edges. So an oriented loops is falling down. So this is oriented loops, like tack, 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 and coming back. And then you continue. Now this edge is the same, so oriented loop is falling down. So now you continue, and then when you arrive here, this is the same as this. So an oriented loop is falling down. So you see this is your trail coming on the top of this sequence of edges. And then when I arrive here, this edge is the same as this one. So another oriented loop is falling down. And at the end, I have this is a trail. It's not a loop. So I put it in blue, means it's at the top of the hips. There is a trail, a path, sequence of oriented edges, all distinct. So this is a trail, and you have to consider this segment as loops. Oriented loops mean it's like a cycle of oriented edges. And what you see, just replace each of these double edges by a blue point, connect them, and you have a heap of segment which is the same as this one. So this is a festival of bijection. All this commute, and you see it. So, and this is the answer to different exercise in the class, and this is to refresh you in memory of last year with the two new bijection of this year, key and psi, between path and heaps of something. So some complement means I am not going to give the complete proof, just to give you an idea of this model in physics, where solid on solid model in physics, where again QBSL function appear. And the explanation is the same. We are going to have heaps of segment, some bijection with heaps of segment. So what means solid on solid model? This is physics, surface interaction, boundary potential, magnetic field. This is physics. Maybe you don't understand, but you will understand the next slide, which is combinatorics. So we have to count this. In physics, a solid on solid model, you have some path in green. It's a partially directed self-avoiding path or walk. So it can go, partially directed means it can go north, east, or south. And you see, I am taking account of the area below the path. So the physicists, they want to have the geometric function of such a path with 4 parameters. So you have the weight is going to be, the parameter y is the same for counting the vertical step. If you have a north step or a south step, this gives you the variable y. Now when you have a level step E, this gives you an x, and then it depends on the level. If E step at level j, you put q power j. So this will take account of the area below the path. And more you are taking, if the level is 0, you put a kappa, means the contact of the path with the surface. So this is kind of attraction or repulsion path with so this is very common in statistical mechanics. So you see your path here, and there's 4 parameters. So here is the weight of this path. You see, you are counting by east step, vertical step, area of the path, and number of contact of the path with the oriental axis. And the weight is this. So this was by physicists in Australia, in Melbourne, of the Rag and Prelberg. There are many papers, and this is one of the papers where they give the geometric function for such path. The sum of the weight with the 4 variable is given by this, where h, you see, is almost the same as or maybe the same as the QBSL function. No, now you have Q, yes, no, a little different, but it's the same spirit of the QBSL function with the parameter u inside. So it's about the same. There is just a shift here. There is y2, here x. So the difference, there is now a term 1 minus y2. So you have to explain, first to explain the appearance of QBSL, because its numerator divided by denominator is the inversion lemma. And there is something more to get this 1 minus y2. So J0 and J1 are related to H by this relation. You can believe me. And J0 over J0, you can write this like this. This is technical detail, but the spirit is that I am going to have a bijection between this path, SOS path, with some pyramid of segment, semi-pyramid of segment, and I have to see how the weight is preserved. So here is my path with north, east, south, and I do the analog of going from a Dicke path to a Lukasiewicz path. If I do the analog, then you see I take each east step, and before it I take the longest sequence of south step. So you have the decomposition of your SOS path into this sequence of down step, maximal sequence of down step, followed by an east. And then you replace this by just a jump going down, this long sequence, this red part, you replace it by this jumping down in red. And now the east step is replaced by a little loops here. And so I can apply this path is going by the bijection with the bijection key. It's going to be in bijection with heaps of cycle like this, heaps of segment, which can be, so the bijection is like this, same spirit. It's going to have heaps of segment with there is some constraint, because you must have some loops here. The condition is that after a down step, you must have an east step. You cannot go up immediately after because the path is weakly directed. It's self-avoiding path. So the condition is after south, you must have a north. You must have an east step between when you change the direction from south to north and from north to south. So there is this condition, which is going to introduce the term 1 minus y2. But it's a complement, so I don't give the complete detailed proof. It's just to give you the idea. It's this path, in fact, with according to decomposition analog to Lukashevich path from Dicke path, give you a certain analog of Lukashevich path, which is in bijection with the hips of segment, hips of cycle of any length. This is the top. The hips is rotated 90 degrees, so this is the top level, the maximal piece, or if you prefer it, hips like this of segment. Okay, and the condition on the path to be self-avoiding is going to be there is going to be you replace t by x 1 minus y2 in the equation. It's going because there is a path with no peak like this. So this you have to check that there is an involution which is going to kill the bad path and to keep only. So there is an evolution behind this substitution to kill the bad path and remain always a self-avoiding path. I don't give the technical detail, but this is the idea. You see, it's from the path you get hips of segment, you get the ratio inversion lemma of two Q analog of Bessel function, and then you have to explain this substitution by involution to get the self-avoiding path. So it's always the same. This path, like the staircase polygon, are in bijection with some hips of segment, and you get the ratio of 2Q Bessel. There is some other paper also. This is in French, where also there is some paths like this. It's not solid on solid paths. They are not above a surface with touching. They are like this. But then the red, you are counting this by the interaction. As soon as you have two vertex which are close together, so there is an attraction or a repulsion. So we are counting this path by the number of red edges. And again, some Q-Bessel function appear. So again, it can be explained with some other modified bijection. So this is the spirit of this appearance of Q-Bessel in physics. I would have liked to give another chapter on hips and continued fraction. So I have a summary of this chapter with the Ramanujan continued fraction, and which fit in this last part. So particular case of hips of segment, when the segments are reduced to dimers, then this is related to Ramanujan continued fraction. So I give you the explanation. So if you take the hips of the dimers k minus 1k equal q power kt, and if the semi-pyramid, you see, semi-pyramid here, you put this weight with a t and q power k, and if this semi-pyramid comes from a Dicke path in the bijection, then I get the weight of this pyramid, the weight of this hips of segment where all segments have length 2 is going to be related to the area of the Dicke path. Why? Because it takes your Dicke path, you see, here is this is another Q analog of a Catalan number. We have seen area of staircase polygon give you the Q polia, but this is another Q analog. If you take the area below the Dicke path, and you see the area below the Dicke path, it's like when you do the bijection between Dicke path and semi-pyramid of dimers, you see each time you go down, it's going to give you a dimer, and the weight of the dimer q power 2 here this would be q power 0, q power 1, q power 2. So it's just a shift. The weight of the down step in the Dicke path, which is 2, 1, 2, 2. There is no weight here. It's this weight, which counts the number of cells below the Dicke path, is going to be the weight of the semi-pyramid. But there is just a shift because the smallest weight of this first dimer is the weight Q, Q2, Q3, and here in the Dicke path, this is weight. This is weight Q. This is weight 1, Q. So Q power 0, Q power 1, Q power 2. So it's just a shift of Q. So if you want really to have the area, the genetic function for area below Dicke path, you have to shift the weight of the segment q power k minus 1t instead of q power kt. And then, so the total generating function of such semi-pyramids, instead of putting q power k, let's do minus q power k. Change again the weight. And I am interested in the sum of the weight, total weight of all these semi-pyramids. And then I'm going to Ramanujan with this. Instead of plus q power k, you put minus. So the weight of this, say, the first dimers are all weighted minus q, the second column minus q2, minus q3, etc. The dimers k minus k is weighted minus q power k. This is the weight, total weight of my semi-pyramids. So it's like a partition here, and there is a plus or minus. And I claim that I am related to Roger Ramanujan identities. And so in the class, we already met Roger Ramanujan identity with a pyramid, with a hard hexagonal model, the pyramid of hexagon. So here are the first and second Ramanujan identities. I didn't explain in the class the interpretation in terms of partition. So let's do it now. So the left-hand side of the first Ramanujan identity is the derivative function for D partition. And this derivative function, sigma of q power m to the square divided by all this product, I claim that this is a derivative function for a certain class of partition. D partition, it's a condition that between two consecutive parts, the difference is at least 2. And why? There is an easy bijection. This was an exercise of last year also. Find the bijection between any partition with at most n part and D partition with exactly n parts, but there is a shift in the weight between the sum of the lambda I and the sum of the part is going to be the sum of the part here plus 1 plus 3 plus 5 plus etc., which is n to the square, which explains this q power m to the square. So if you have 1 divided by this is a derivative function for partition having at most n part. If you multiply by this is going to be D partition is exactly n parts. And the bijection is this: take a partition with at most n part, n to the square. The Greek time proof of the Greek time is a proof without word is given by this identity, and then you put 1 plus 3. This would be 5. There is a mistake here. 1 plus 3 plus 5 plus 7 plus 8. At each level, you add 1, 3, 5, 7, and then from a general partition, you get exactly a D partition. See, the difference is at least 2 between two consecutive parts. Now, the left-hand side of the first Ramanujan identity is exactly the derivative function for trivial heaps of dimers. And here you explain why I put a minus. If you put a weight minus q power k for the dimer k minus 1k, then the alternative derivative function, the denominator, alternative derivative function of such trivial heaps of dimers is going to be exactly this, because the minus coming from the alternating derivative function, minus 1, and there is a minus 1 for each dimer, so everything is positive here. And so if I take the derivative function for semi-pyramids of dimers, my generating function before, here, derivative function for semi-pyramids of dimers. So I claim I apply the inversion lemma, n divided by D, and I claim now that n and D are exactly, D is exactly the left-hand side of the first Roger Ramanujan identities. So this is D. Any D partition is in bijection with the trivial heaps of dimers. Here is my trivial heaps of dimer, Q, Q4, Q6, Q10, and here is a D partition, 10, 6, 4, 1. Because the worst can happen, the two dimers are close together, and this is the worst for the D partition to have a difference of 2. So trivial heaps of dimers is exactly in bijection with D partition. So my denominator is a derivative function, alternating derivative function for trivial heaps of dimers, but I have twice. I have minus 1 for the dimer, minus Q, minus 1 for the weight. So the denominator is this. Now the numerator is just a shift. It's just trivial heaps of dimers, which does not contain the point 0. So it's a shift. So shift means you multiply this left-hand side D by q power n to be sure that you don't have any part equal to 1. You are shifting this, and this is the left-hand side of the second Roger Ramanujan identity. So what I did not explain in the class is that there's a nice interpretation of both. The right-hand side inverse of this product means, if you look back at the proof as a product of rectangle is a sequence of row. If you look back the proof of this infinite product for the derivative function for partition, then if you restrict the part equal 1 and 4 modulo 5, this is exactly partition. This is an example with n equal 9. The coefficient of q power 9 here is the number of partition with part equal to 1 and 4 modulo 5. So if n equal 9, I have 5 partition. 9, 4 plus 1, etc. This is all the partition of 9 with part equal 1, 4, 6, 9, 11, 1 and 4 modulo 5. Now the left-hand side is D partition. All the partition with difference between two consecutive parts is at least 2, so we have 5 partition. And this is a big major problem to find a nice bijection between both hand sides. Maybe there is no nice bijection, even no piecewise, like Amri, like this bijection. But this is a deep identity. This is one of the G-wall of Q series and one of the G-wall of combinatorics. That these two sets of partitions are same number on both sides, and it's not at all obvious. There's no bijection. There is some bijection, but terrible bijection. I will not comment too much on this, not to be not nice with some friend. Now the second identity. Second, you see, you change completely. Now the right-hand side is all partition equal 2 and 3 modulo 5. So they are totally different. The right-hand side. But the left-hand side is because you multiply by q power n, it's just the same D partition, same as before, but no part equal to 1. This corresponds to the shift, the numerator. You have no dimers on the living on 0. So take your D partition, you cancel the one with and then there is 3 such partition. 3 and 3, again, there is the same number on both sides. So again, it's a second J-well of combinatorics and Q series. So a few words about continued fraction, heaps and continued fraction. In fact, I have the Ramanujan continued fraction. I claim that the generating function for semi-pyramids, the sum of the weight of all these semi-pyramids is exactly equal to this. Why? It's again a nice decomposition in the heaps. If you take a semi-pyramid, it's a sequence of what I call primitive semi-pyramid. Like pyramid or semi-primitive means you take the maximal piece and below there is nobody. There is only one piece in the column corresponding to the maximal piece. And this on the right will be again what it will be, a shifted semi-pyramid. So again it will be exactly the same NA semi-pyramid, but then the weight is shifted. Instead of q power I, the weight of each dimer you have to replace by q power I plus 1. So this is the map delta, it's shifting the weight, multiplying by q. So again, I like this kind of pushing dimers. So to prove this continued fraction. So take the first column, the lowest dimers, and then say you extract the first semi-pyramid, and the second dimers you extract the second semi-pyramid, etc. So your NA semi-pyramid is can be decomposed in unique way. It's about a sequence in the sense of symbolic calculus. If you know the derivative function of an object, you know the derivative function of secant of object. And so you see NA semi-pyramid, there is a unique decomposition like this. And so you can deduce that derivative function, you see the derivative function for semi-pyramid, it's a sequence of primitive semi-pyramid. So it's 1 over 1 minus the derivative function of semi-pyramid, but there is minus q, the dimer, the maximal piece, you delete it. Here I delete minus q, and what I get is a shifted analog semi-pyramid. So in minus q, sum over all general semi-pyramid, but shifted. The weight is shifted by replacing q power I by q power I plus 1. So I can write this 1. So this is again 1 over 1 minus, etc., etc. You repeat, shifted by 2, and you repeat, and you get the continued fraction. Now you can apply this to the Q Catalan. You see, it's if you go back to Q Catalan, this gives also this continued fraction. Now there's a Q and the T, and the weight is slightly different. It's instead of Q, Q2, Q3, it's 1, Q, Q2, and there is a minus here instead of Ramanujan, the plus, and there is no T here. Why there is no T? It's because it's called Ramanujan continued fraction. If you apply now the inversion lemma, the derivative function for semi-pyramid is given by this continued fraction, and it's given by numerator of the bidirector, so it's given by this. So you get this nice identity completely with very simple, nice explanation of it. What is the question? Or
What
comments?
was Ramanujan's proof?
Of this? It's no, the Roger Ramanujan identity did not prove. It's Roger gave the proof.
Roger.
So 3 people in the world gave the proof of Roger Ramanujan identity. Ramanujan conjectured them. In Cambridge, he discovers the paper of Rogers, which immediately Roger became very famous. So Roger proved them. I think that during the World War 14-18, there was no communication in Europe, and Schur gave another proof. And then Baxter in physics, sure, yes. And then Baxter in physics with the hard hexagonal model, he was not completely aware, I think, of all this identity, and he gave again another proof. He's a physicist and mathematician, so in Baxter, I talk about Baxter because you see, I show you the solution of the hard hexagonal model of Baxter. So you see the R of Q is a Ramanujan continued fraction. Is a ratio of the two, instead of left-hand side, he takes the right-hand side. So R of Q is a ratio of the two Ramanujan continued fraction, and you have to take this ratio power 5. So it is a T, you see. And put Y equals this, and then eliminate Q between these two to get the... No, this is crazy. This is totally crazy. This is Baxter. And if you take the...
Implicit.
It's implicit equation. No, it's crazy. We'll have to have an analog of maybe Roger Ramanujan continued fraction for it. Because continued fraction, you can interpret this in terms of Hipps of diamonds. So can you interpret this also in terms of Hipps? And then you have to eliminate Q between the two. You get Z function of T. Z is a function of this power 5. And you remember I gave you an algebraic system of equation for, not for Z, but for the T times the logarithmic derivative of Z, which is interpreted as a density, which is the Hipps of hexagon. So I don't know if this interpretation, just a Ramanujan continued fraction in terms of Hipps of diamonds, I don't know if the step for the proof of the algebraicity of this, maybe it's nothing, it's 1% of the, I don't know, but this is this 5 plus research problem.
Yeah.
But by the way, we get also a proof of some Andrews theorem. Andrews, remember in the class, we introduced quasi-partition of N. You remember quasi-partition? It was the extension of partition, where this condition, when instead of decreasing weakly, you can increase by 1. Like this. So this is a quasi-partition. So 4, 3, 1, you are decreasing, and then you increase, but just at most 1. And this is a visual diagram, the Schur-Ferrer diagram, which is a visualization of this quasi-partition. You see here you have 4, 3, 1, and when it's increasing by 1 means you are going vertically. You see, it's 2, 1, 2, 3. And then there was an exercise in chapter 1b, page 71. Find a weight preserving bijection between quasi-partition and Hipps of diamonds. So it was easy once if you know the lithographic standard form. The bijection was, you see, I take the lithographic normal form, but from taking the maximal piece and the rightmost maximal piece. So here is general Hipps. Here general Hipps, and from this general Hipps of diamonds, I can get the quasi-partition. So take the maximal piece, the rightmost of the maximal piece. The total order maximal piece of diamonds is from left to right. So the rightmost is this. Then the right, you delete it, then you go here, the second one. Then I have 2 maximal pieces, so this is the rightmost 3. Now this one. So now I have this, you see, and this, and this. So you have a total order of the diamonds. And if you look the indices of the weight, here I am column 3 to 4. So here I have 4, 3, 2, 1. So I have 4, 4, 3, 1, 2. I have a quasi-partition. See, when you delete one of the diamonds, the next maximal piece, maybe it's on the left, but the worst which can happen is like when I increase by 1. So if you delete this maximal piece, you see the new maximal piece is shifted to the right by at most 1. Because if it was shifted by more than 1, then you should have taken the rightmost. So you get, it's easy to see that you get a quasi-partition and that this is a bijection.
This was an exercise.
This was an exercise, but now if you put some weight, Now the inverse. So this was general heaps of timers with the weight is a derivative. And then if the weight D is exactly the left-hand side of Roger Ramanujan identity. So the inverse, this is what the Andrews paper, he gave an direct interpretation of the inverse of the Ramanujan identity was the sum with a certain sign of Q power, the quasi-partition. Oh, I went very fast to finish in time. So some possible future chapter complementary. So it's we have already seen the book of Richard Green, Minuscule Representation of Lie algebra. It's a book in so there is some representation of some Lie algebra and with some operator. It's some operator acting on some heaps, having some property, full heaps or something like this. And the heaps are the Dedekind diagram related to the Lie algebra. This is related also to totally commutative element in some in a Coxeter group, and also related to temporally Lie algebra. For example, Green he just published a paper this week on generalized temporally Lie algebra and some more general Dedekind. Some Dedekind diagram, you see, the basis of such temporally Lie algebra is again described with the heaps of some pieces on the Dedekind diagram. There's also a basis of free partially commutative Lie algebra. So commutation monoid is just a partial commutation of the letters, but you can associate free partially commutative Lie algebra. It means you take the Lie algebra generated by the letters, and some letters commute. So the Lie bracket AB going to be 0, AB equals BA, and some letter does not commute. So if nobody commute, you get the free Lie algebra, which is exactly, you take the non-commutative polynomial in variable x, and then you put the Lie algebra associated to the non-commutative polynomial, and you get the free Lie algebra. The non-commutative polynomial in variable x are exactly the envelope algebra of the Lie algebra. And then it's well known that there is a basis of the free Lie algebra in terms of Linden words. There's many different bases. But in terms of word, the Linden word is a primitive word, which means it's all its conjugates are different. It's not the power of another word. And the Linden word means it's the minimum for the lexicographic order in its conjugation class. So you can extend this to have extending the conjugation in terms of heaps, meaning that you have two heaps, and you take one heap and you put it, you just UV and VU. The difficulty is that if you take heaps equal product U by V, take the heap V by U, this relation is not, you have to take the transitive closure of this relation to get the conjugation in terms of heaps. And then you can define Linden heaps, and there is this gives basis of this Lie algebra, partially commutative Lie algebra, and we have seen some talks of Arun Kumar, who shows that the decomposition of heaps into Linden heaps, if you take the number factor of the Linden heaps, this gives you the chromatic polynomial, coefficient of lambda power p in the chromatic polynomial over the graph where you take the heaps. So it is very interesting connection. Also, there is a statistical physics. There is a resolution of the Ising model by Tyler Helmut, and you have to count such loops, such a graph with by number of edges. In each vertex there is 0, 2, or 4 edges. Now you can. This is a Kaken-Ward approach. You can put some paths in this. You can follow the edges. So put oriented loops, but there is many ways to do this. So you can kill every loop so that to get back this with no orientation. So you can have an involution killing all of them. You have to count how many times you turn 90 degree left or 90 degree right. If you put a weight, but another way you turn around in one direction or the other direction, then you are going to have an involution killing everybody. And so you can, the approach is to put a path on this, and then the thermodynamical limit, it's going, you can have pyramids of such things, so you can, it's reduced to paths and the bijection between paths and oriented loops. But you have, the path must be non-backtracking, because if you have a path and you go back on the same edges, then it's not going to give you such a picture. And in the paper by Helmut, in fact, it's strongly non-backtracking. It's more than non-backtracking. So there is some more work to do. It's not so obvious. But the philosophy is to use this bijection, the bijection psi between paths and oriented loops, and to do some work to get to reprove, to get the generating function for such IG model. And I have mentioned the paper by Ramgoolam on the jauge theory and heaps. There is Quiver, there is many papers in pure algebra. There is a nice paper by Di Francesco Kedem about Q system, heaps, paths, and cluster positivity. This is a cluster algebra introduced by Fomin and Zelevansky. There is some conjecture, or positivity conjecture, and there is Q system come from physics, and there is path and there is heaps, so there are many beautiful things together. It's a long paper, 60 or 70 pages, where there is the heaps appearing in this story. And if you like computer science, there is a new, in volume 4, fascicle 6 by Donald Knuth. There is the satisfiability problem. It's the whole fascicle is devoted to this SAT problem, the satisfiability problem. You have a logic expression. You want to know if it's possible, if there is some putting the variable true or false, if you can be true for the whole expression. There's many algorithms. One of these algorithms is based on a lemma. And the lemma needs an inversion lemma n divided by d. So Knuth, in his book, he go about the trace monoid, and he did not like the term heaps. So we have a long discussion by mail. Because heaps, he asked me to change the name. They say, I know there is 50 or 100 papers with I cannot change heaps. So he finally decided to use the name empilement. He put in French in his book empilement, the pièce empilement. There is another beautiful thing I would like to expose one day. Is the Zielonka theorem. You know, rational language are accepted by automata. We have seen this last year. Where you have a rational and automata, you take a word and you read the word. If a finite number of states, if you read A, B, C, or D, then you will change the state according to the state and the letter is reading. There is the initial state and the final state, and then the set of words which starting from the initial state and ending in the final state is a word accepted by the automata. If you want to have the generating function of such word by the length or by the number of occurrence of each letter, then it's exactly the inversion matrix formula, numerator divided by denominator, which is cofactor, determinant. We have seen this many times. And this is in physics called the transition matrix methodology. This is the same philosophy, transition matrix, automata, finite automata. So what is the analog of finite automata? Language recognized by finite automata in terms of the commutation monoid, which means that if a word is accepted by the automata, it should accept all the words equivalents, all the words of the commutation class. So what are the automata which accept language of the commutation monoid? This is important maybe for example, for generative function of heaps or diamonds, according to the length, according to the height of the heaps, etc. There is some problem where it's analog. You have to find generating function for rational language in terms of commutation monoid. And Zielonka theorem tells you that any automata like this is equivalent to another automata which is obvious. It's going to accept words in the commutation monoid. Suppose you have a basic basis, many points. In each point there is many states. And suppose the letter A, it's a heaps of subset. And suppose you apply letter A means you are taking your heaps of subset, and below all the states on the basis are going to change. And you have another letter B, again, you put it here, and all the states below are going to change. So if you do A and B or B and A, of course, it's commute. It will. So if the automata, this kind of automata will accept words in the commutation monoid. And the Zielonka theorem tells you that every automata accepting a commutation class is equivalent to such automata. The automata of heaps of subset, and when you put your it's intuitive, when you put your hand on the basis, pushing when you put your hand, then all the states below are going to change according to a transition matrix, etc. So this is in a very quickly term the philosophy of this theorem, which can be useful for enumeration in the combinatorics. So I would like to have a nice proof. This is a deep theorem. It's Zielonka. In fact, he comes from Poland, and when I see he has some scratch before publishing his paper. If you look at the handwritten paper, there is some segment and heaps of segment inside the paper. So he gets the intuition of this theorem, maybe by having the heaps intuition. So this is the end of chapter 7, and before finishing the class, there is an epilogue. To conclude, epilogue with what I call Kepler towers. This is a surprising result on the heaps of pieces. So Kepler, I will explain what is a tower, what is Kepler doing, what Kepler is doing in this story. So here is a picture. You take a sequence of polygon, regular polygon. The first one has size 2. Then there is 4 edges, 8 edges, 16 edges, etc. Take an infinite sequence of such a circle, and such a cycle are alternatively, the edges are black, white, etc. Okay, and then I am going to put some dimers on this sequence of polygon. I call a system of Kepler towers. So you have the regular polygon, pi with 2 power I edges, black and white, and the system of Kepler towers is going to be heaps, H1, H2, Hk. Each AI is a heaps of dimers above the polygon pi. So this is one of the Kepler tower for I going from 1 to k. And such as that, the condition is that at level 0, Hi contains all the 2 power a minus 1 black edges of pi. So you see, you are putting some dimers. First, you fill this. So here it's each time there is only 2 power n such dimer. Then you begin to put some dimer here. So you have to put 2 dimers on the black at the floor level, and then you can put dimers. So each time you are putting some dimer on one of the polygon, all the polygon inside must have on the floor, all the black edges on the floor must be filled with the dimers. You are not allowed to start a big polygon outside without having filled up all the black edges of all the polygon inside. So example, this is the first tower. First you put one of the black edges there is only one, so there is 2 power n such towers. Now the next one, there is 4 edges. So in red, this is the black. This is the 2 black edges in red at the floor level. Then you can put any dimers as you want on this cycle. Then the next tower is like this. So if you prefer, you can put the tower one inside each other. So this is a system of Kepler towers. You can have big system like this. So this is a beautiful new cometary object system of Kepler towers. And the surprise.
So all have to be full? All the
Yes. Before inside, you see, if you see here all this is the black edges. So all are full.
The outer ring also.
Yes.
Everything.
As soon if you begin to put any dimers in one of the polygons, first you must fill up all the black edges. You are not allowed to put only one black edge. No, all must be covered. And then above you can do everything you want. But as soon as you open a new polygon, a new tower, you must fill up all the black edges. So in each Kepler tower, there is the first Kepler, there is at least one dimer. The next one, there is 2 dimers. The next one, 4, 8, 16, 32. So you can have system of Kepler tower with any number of dimers you want. Once you have filled up the dimer with 32 black edges, then you can put many inside. You have no limit to put inside. So what is the number of system of Kepler tower having n dimers? Who can guess?
You have to do some binary decomposition of n.
The number of system Kepler towers with n
Number
dimers.
of odd dimensions.
And the number of odd, yes, it's a number maybe.
Nightless. Yeah.
So this number is Catalan.
Wow.
This is another interpretation of Catalan numbers,
Okay.
which is surprising. And so you can write Catalan. This is the black edges are blue now, and this is the projection on the floor. You see, so you see this is a level. Each concentric circle is a level of inside the tower. So you see, so this one at level 0, at level 1, level 2, and the red circle are just overlapping a little, so that it's a dependency relation. So you can write this system of Kepler tower like this, or you can put them inside like a CD, and there is all the Kepler tower are like this. And if you buy the book of Richard Stanley, he has a book on Catalan number, and this is the cover of the book. So you understand that this picture is related to Catalan numbers. This is the explanation of Catalan numbers. So why Kepler tower? Why I call this Kepler towers? I was lucky to be in Metag-Leffler. Again, when I do the Nordic decomposition, I was Donald Knuth for 1 month in Metag-Leffler, and we were talking about heaps of diamonds, everything, and he did not like the term heaps. So, and he was writing, we were working on a bijection to prove a bijection between Kepler tower and trees or dig paths. And doing this, there was a lot of other bijection, and he was working on the bijection, and he needed in the same writing the data structure heaps. Heaps is a data structure in computer science, and so that was maybe the only papers in the Earth where you have both notions, heaps as a data structure and heaps of pieces in the same. So I proposed to put Kepler tower instead of heaps of diamonds. So this is a Metag-Leffler, very nice institute in Sweden. We were in winter in January for 1 month, so we have plenty of time to do mathematics and bijection. And why Kepler? What is doing Kepler in this? You know, this regular polygon included in one each other, that reminds, in the Mysterio Homographicum, that reminds, he tried to explain the number of planets by the number of platonic solids. So this reminds me of this picture, you see. And even they were, to measure, they were doing also polygon. See, this is a different planet, and they were using a polygon inside, so a polygon here. And to explain the solar system, there's gravity, this is quantum gravity, so I think this was fit. This was a good term, Kepler tower, because all this connection. And so here is a number, so this is a Catalan number. Now you can ask, but we have a distribution. What is the number of system of Kepler with a number of towers? So the surprise is that it's exactly the same distribution as the Strahler number on binary tree. This is another parameter introduced last year. So what is the Strahler number? You take a binary tree, you put a 0 in every leaf. 0 and 0 give 1, 1 and 1 give 2, but 2 and 1 give 2. So the rule is that if you have a label on the k and k prime, then the label of the father or the mother is maximum of k prime if they are different, and if they are the same, is k plus 1. So here, and 2 is the Strahler number of the binary tree, the maximum label at the root. And I claim that the number of system of Kepler tower with k tower is the same as the number of binary tree with Strahler number equal to k. Proof. I will finish with this proof. So dig path. If you take a dig path which is bounded by height k, then you can define the logarithmic height of the dig path is the floor of logarithm by 2 of 1 plus the height. Take the logarithm. Roughly speaking, means that logarithmic height of the dig path is equal to k if and only if the height of the dig path is between 2 power k minus 1 and 2 power k plus 1 minus 1. And then Françon gave a bijection very complicated between binary tree with k Strahler number equal k and dig path with logarithmic height equal k. And then Donald Knuth at that time in Metag-Leffler, he came with a very nice, fantastic, very deep bijection, a new bijection that we did not know to such bijection in combinatorics. And that's the way in this bijection you have the dig path, you have the binary tree, and then you have an extra data structure with a heap, and then everything is dynamic, moving, the heaps, you erase, you take, you erase, and then at the end you have the nice bijection of Donald Knuth to explain this equality of distribution. And so we are reduced to count dig paths by bounded height. And we know that the dig path with the height bounded by k if Strahler number equal less than k is going to be the ratio of two Fibonacci polynomial, two consecutive, but now it's 2 power k plus 1 minus 1. Now if you want to have Strahler number, the binary tree or Dick-Pass with exactly logarithmic height equal k, you have to make the difference of this and k minus 1. Some trigonometric, some property of Fibonacci polynomial gives you this. And now this generative function is going to be this multiplied by the Lucas polynomial up here. There was an exercise, a Fibonacci odd index equal Fibonacci 2n plus 1 by Fibonacci n multiplied by Lucas n. So apply this to 2 power k plus 1 and you get this equality. Repeat it many times and you get this. And here is a Kepler tower appearing. And because there is 2 power of 2 which gives you you are forced to fill up all the black edges. So it is the way that I showed, I'm discussing with Donald to prove that it was really the Strahler number. But in fact, there is a bijective proof of this, and so he has written some program, 3 Catalan bijection is in the website. So he has another bijection, you see. There is bijection between system Kepler tower and Dick-Pass like this, and this bijection. So there is 2 bijection, which proves that these 3 cometal objects, binary tree, Dick-Pass, and Kepler tower are of the same distribution according to the number of towers. Okay, so thank you very much. Thank you for all. Thank you all of you. Student, professor, friend, video technician. I'm reading, it's not on the screen, and Math Science channel. So thank you to everybody. And thank you for the reader who follows the almost 24 hours of video. And we are at slide number 1817. This is the number of slides of the class. So thank you everybody, and see you next year for the third part of the bijective combinatorial class. Thank you.
Next year, yeah.